I rise today to talk about the immigration crisis that this president has generated. The nation has seen images of children trapped behind wire fencing, children sleeping on concrete floors. We've seen the tents hurriedly set up to house children separated from their parents. And we've seen the video of Jessica, who doesn't know where her mother is and wants to talk to her. We've heard the audio of young children crying out for their mothers and fathers. And we've heard the audio of a detention facility staff person telling the kids not to talk to the press, claiming it will hurt their immigration case. As of June 12th, on American soil, over 100 babies under the age of 1 year are being held in detention by the American government. And we think this can't be happening in the United States of America, but it is. Last Friday, Senators Heinrich and Blumenthal and I visited President Trump's tent city in Tornillo, Texas, and we toured a Border Patrol station in Clint and El Paso and a port of entry in El Paso. We were turned away from Tornillo on Friday, and so I went back Saturday and got inside to see the children. We all went to these government facilities to get answers, but we came up short. Most pressing, we still don't know when or how all the thousands of children taken from their parents will be reunited. We don't know how children whose parents have already been deported will be reunited. We have parents scared they will never see their children again. The confusion, chaos, and incompetence with which the president's zero-tolerance policy was executed is only outmatched by the confusion, chaos, and incompetence with which reunification is being handled. The immediate priority must be to get these children back to their parents as soon as possible. We know we are doing damage to these children every day they are not with their families. We know this. Pediatric and mental health professionals all agree. The American Academy of Pediatrics condemned the administration because those doctors know separating families can result in irreparable harm. That's the quote of the American Pediatric Association, irreparable harm to separated children. Last weekend, I saw children detained in tents in Tornillo, only able to talk to their parents twice a week for 10 minutes. I saw astounding young children 3 to 10 years old, who crossed the border without their parents. And I saw families from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador fleeing violence and persecution, locked in detention at Border Patrol. And I met Hade Gabriela, who's not even 2, her father detained in El Paso, both of them trying to escape the brutality and gangs in Honduras. President Trump claims there is a border crisis, but communities on the border dispute this. I'm a senator from a border state, and I dispute this. I represent border communities, and I've been to the border many, many times, recently and over the years. President Trump has not. He should come down for himself and see the humanitarian crisis he has created. Detention facilities for children are overwhelmed. We have heard from a whistleblower in New York that there's not enough staffing at her facility because of all the young children coming in. These internment camp-like facilities, as former First Lady Laura Bush has compared them to, are costing Americans and American taxpayers millions of dollars. The Tornillo tent city costs $400,000 every day, and the president's poorly conceived executive order directs the Department of Homeland Security Secretary to set up even more family detention facilities on military bases. Zero tolerance has overwhelmed the U.S. Attorney's offices on the border. Now, instead of prosecuting violent criminals for serious crimes, federal prosecutors are wasting resources, focusing instead on criminally prosecuting mothers and fathers for misdemeanor improper entry violations. There's a call to take military JAG lawyers away from their more important duties to handle the flood of immigration cases, and recalling prosecutors from their posts in Indian country where they are so sorely needed. All systems are bursting at the seams thanks to the president's made-up crisis, cruelty, and bureaucratic incompetence. As of today, there is no clear path forward to reunite families. No timeline. Tuesday, the Secretary for Health and Human Services, Secretary Azar, admitted in his testimony before the Senate Finance Committee, no timeline. The Department of Health and Human Services is prohibited under the Flores case from reuniting children with parents who are in detention. But the president wants to keep zero tolerance in place and continue to prosecute and keep parents in detention with their children. Not only is this cruel and un-American, but I think the federal judge in Flores is going to reject the president's request to allow children to be jailed with their parents longer than 20 days. The president has doubled down on zero tolerance, and like many of his policies that are hastily implemented and born of his divisive agenda, there is no plan B if the court refuses, as it should, to allow children to be jailed with their parents. There is an obvious solution. Successful alternatives to detention have demonstrated compliance rates of 99% with court appearances and ICE appointments. These programs are both effective and cost a fraction of what it takes to detain families. So why doesn't the president use these programs and save taxpayers millions of dollars? Because he thinks it doesn't appear tough. And he takes away his bargaining chip of detained children he thinks he can use to get his wall. In the president's rush to gain political traction, he has created a humanitarian and moral crisis within our own borders, the likes of which we have not seen since we interned families of Japanese heritage during World War II. But I can tell you that I will not back down from this fight, and more importantly, I can tell you that the American people and New Mexicans are with me. It is the voices of the American people that forced the president to retreat from his brutal family separation policy, and it is those voices that will prevail in the end. The administration is trying its hardest to hide what's going on from the American people, but the American people are demanding answers. We all must continue to speak out until we have policies in place that make sure families stay together, lawfully and humanely. We need alternatives to detention, and we need to stand up for due process. As Americans see images of separated children and family detention camps, they turn to Congress, and they turn to the judicial system as well. A federal district judge recently issued a ruling barring family detention and ordering reunification within 30 days. But the Trump administration may fight this ruling, just like they're fighting to overturn Flores, which came out of a Supreme Court case. And now, today, Justice Kennedy has announced he is retiring. I had some very strong disagreements with his rulings, especially on campaign finance reform. But I thank him for his service. He was a thoughtful judge. But I am very concerned with the process to replace him. The majority leader is trying to eliminate advice and consent from the process. We should wait until after the upcoming election. That will be a shorter time than Leader McConnell waited in 2016, the last election year. And I'm very concerned with the president's process. He's picking from an ideological list with a history of personally attacking judges he disagrees with, while demanding loyalty from his appointees. At the same time, this administration is undermining due process across the board, along the border, for minority races or religions, for a woman's right to choose. The Constitution requires a real advice and consent process. The majority leader needs to ensure one. If the McConnell rule was in place in 2016 election year, it should be in place for 2018. Given the president's attacks on due process and rule of law, we should let the people speak before we consider his next Supreme Court nominee. Mr. President, I yield the floor.